Hello and welcome to this edition of Africa Today, a program which gives an in-depth analysis on news making headlines in Africa. In this edition, we are looking into the plundering of the Democratic Republic of Congo's mineral wealth by American technology giants, which have now been taken to court for exploiting Congolese children in what has been termed as a classic case of modern-day slavery. We shall be asking, are Western multinational companies inciting civil wars in the DRC to loot the country's mineral wealth? We shall also be looking at the prospects for economic growth in Africa, a continent with some of the world's fastest growing economies. We are asking, why is poverty still prevalent in Africa despite the reported rapid economic growth? And will a looming debt crisis hinder the progress of Africa? For more on this, stay tuned. I'm your host, Mubarak Kenya.
Last December, 5 of the world's largest technology companies were taken to court by a human rights group over exploitation of Congolese children. The international rights advocates filed a case in U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. against Apple, Alphabet, the parent company of Google and YouTube, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla on behalf of the families of 14 Congolese child miners.
We traced the supply chain back from the mine where the children were either killed or maimed and have traced it back up to these companies.
These companies buy cobalt, a rare earth metal essential for the batteries used in cell phones and electric vehicles, from mining companies including the Chinese-owned Huayu Cobalt, Anglo-Swiss Glencore, and the Belgian-based Umicore, all of whom are accused of actively engaging in illegal mining activity involving children.
The United Nations, which is based in the DRC, says that there are at least 40,000 children working in these artisanal mines in the southern part of the country. How many are working on cobalt as opposed to other minerals, we don't know, but it's clearly a very large problem.
Now, for more analysis on this issue, we have contacted Linda Masarira, a Zimbabwean politician and president of Labour Economists and African Democrats. She's also a human rights activist who is known for her role in advocating for child rights. Now, our first question, Ms. Masarira, this is apparently the first time that tech industry companies have jointly faced legal action over the source of their cobalt. Should Congolese children expect justice in a U.S. court?
It remains to be seen whether America will actually champion human rights and justice for these children whose rights are being violated, or they will be an ally of modern-day slavery. We should also not forget that the American government, American people, and the American economy has been benefiting from the taxes from these 5 rich companies which are in America. So this is a case where we're going to see human rights abuses versus economic benefits. And I think it is actually important for every African to be able to follow this case and ensure that justice is done through advocacy work and that these children will be compensated at the end of the day.
According to the estimates, the total mineral wealth of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is $24 trillion, making it potentially one of the richest countries on Earth. Western and over the recent past, Asian countries, especially China, continue to plunder the country's minerals with impunity.
I don't study. My job is to dig for minerals.
Children who are exposed to working in hazardous conditions will acquire quite serious medical conditions as a result, asthma, respiratory problems. The fact that they are likely not to have easy access to medical care can also compound that.
The case filed in the U.S. court appears to be only symbolic, as it demands for compensation for children forced to work in Congolese mines, while other major issues related to the massive looting of the country's wealth are yet to be highlighted. Now, apart from the issue of child exploitation, mining by Western and Chinese companies causes considerable health problems and environmental damage and economic deprivation in the Congo. How can these issues be addressed?
These children are laboring in mines that are not even ISO certified. The very same Western mining companies like Glencore and the Chinese companies that are taking young children into these mines make sure that they comply to ISO standards in other countries, in their own countries. But when it comes to Africa, they're not complying on those standards. Maybe it is a case of thinking that African children do not have a right to safety and protection. So it is a matter that also needs legal advocates in DRC to ensure that all these mines are closed if they do not comply with the ISO standards.
The fact that elections at the end of 2018 marked the first peaceful transition of power in the DRC since 1965 does not necessarily imply a new dawn awaits the Congolese people. President Felix Tshisekedi was not a product of a political revolution against the Kabila dynasty, but instead represented a Western-backed compromise between the two factions of the ruling class, in which Tshisekedi ascended to the presidency on the condition that a Kabila ally was appointed prime minister. The current Congolese government, like previous ones, appears to be acting on behalf of American, European, and Chinese high-tech companies and their suppliers in the cobalt processing industry. The ruling class in the DRC has not raised concrete objections against exploitation by Western countries. Are they accomplices in crimes against their own people?
We see a case here where we've got a ruling elite in DRC that is benefiting from this abuse, which should actually be brought to order. And these are real issues that America should be holding the DRC government to account. This is a real case where if America was sincere about the issue to do with sanctions, they were supposed to start sanctioning those companies that are operating in DRC. But we see America silent because they are benefiting from the cobalt that they are looting from DRC.
Meanwhile, the United States is accused of instigating the invasion of the DRC by its proxies Rwanda and Uganda in 1996 and 1998, leading to the slaughter of 6.9 million Congolese. That war is considered one of the deadliest and most prolonged conflicts since the Second World War.
The foreign-backed wars and unprecedented looting of Congo's mineral resources that started during the colonial rule by Belgium and continues to be perpetrated by other Western countries have all converted the DRC into one of the poorest countries in the world. The DRC has been plagued by devastating wars for decades. Now, do you think there is any relation between the wars and the plundering of the country's mineral resources by Western multinational companies?
There is a big relation between the wars and the plundering and looting of resources in DRC by multinational companies. It is known worldwide that most Western countries have been involved in destabilizing the African countries where they have interests. We have seen this happening in Rwanda, it has happened in Libya, we have seen it recurring time and again in the DRC.
With 1,800,000 troops, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is the largest in the world. UN peacekeepers have been in Congo for 20 years without restoring peace or changing the Congolese people's lives in areas in which it is deployed.
The UN peacekeepers have also faced a catalogue of scandals, including abusing vulnerable women and children and smuggling minerals, especially gold.
And we are here to take bold, urgent and much-needed action to root out sex or exploitation and abuse once and for all in the United Nations.
We have not yet, in my view, found an adequate means of trying to give people a sense that they're being made whole again. You can never make someone who's been sexually violated whole, but you can give them a sense that the organization is trying to make them whole.
Balifikaka hapa ku 2010 bafika kamata resettlement batoto depuis baliendaka mpaka leo bado nakabo tena tutakuwa bokalanda tutakuwa balanda si.
Despite this, the UN continues to renew the mandate of its scandal-hate peacekeeping force in the DRC. Now, in your opinion, why have the UN peacekeeping troops failed to restore peace in the DRC despite such a massive presence?
And we must not also forget that the very same UN forces are paid from the proceeds from the cobalt and all the diamond mining that is happening in the DRC. So it is imperative for UN to be sincere in their peacekeeping mission. We have also noted that the soldiers only intervene when they are ensuring protection and evacuation of foreigners or when they are defending themselves. There hasn't been real will to ensure that they end war in DRC. And how can they end a war that is directly benefiting their masters?
This year marks the 59th anniversary of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba by the CIA. Lumumba, the revolutionary leader of the Congolese independence movement, who resisted Belgian colonialism and Western corporate interests, was assassinated in a US-backed coup in a move that paved way to the current exploitation of the DRC.
The murder of anti-imperialist Lumumba and his replacement by the US-backed dictator Mobutu Sese Seko laid the foundation for the decades of internal strife, dictatorship, economic exploitation and plundering that have marked post-colonial Congo.
And I am pleased to have been able to meet again with President Mobutu, who's been a faithful friend of the United States for some 20 years. The President and I took this opportunity to review the state of U.S.-Zairean relations, and we found a large area of agreement on the major points we discussed.
Do you think the elimination of Patrice Lumumba was the beginning of renewed plundering of post-independence Congo by Western powers?
Patrice Lumumba was assassinated for his nationalistic views, for his anti-imperialistic stance. They created a puppet in the name of Mobutu Sese Seko, who came in and allowed them to loot, to plunder, and to do whatever they wanted in DRC. This was not the first case in Africa. We have seen it. It has happened in Chile, where Salvador Allende was actually removed from power so that they would put in another general who would do exactly what they want. At the end of the day, Africans need to protect their sovereignty, protect their people, protect their natural resources, and stop being selfish and egocentric and allowing Americans and CIA to continue looting and plundering our resources.
And now in this segment of our program, my colleague Sheila Nelima is here with more news and views from across Africa. What do you have today, Sheila?
Thank you, Henia. Hello and welcome to this part of the program. It's Sheila Nelima bringing you news from around Africa. We begin with a review of Ghana's Year of Return campaign, a move launched by President Akufo-Addo as a program for Africans in the diaspora to unite with fellow Africans. The year was symbolically a memorial of 400 years since the first enslaved Africans touched down in the United States. Though met by criticism, the year recorded a success for Ghana. It made a global movement with A-list celebrities answering the call, and the estimated number of tourists expected surpassed by over 50%. On to one of Africa's best economic performers, Ethiopia. The economy has been growing at a rate of 10% for the past 15 years. Since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's emergence, the country has been making reforms and investing heavily in infrastructure, technology, agriculture, and education. Though not devoid of disputes, the country is set to build the biggest airport in Africa, complete the giant dam on the Blue Nile, and expand its import and export logistics hub by 10 times. In related news, the growth and improvement of infrastructure seems to be the new decade's trend. Cape Verde announced an international open tender contract for the construction of the Mindelo Cruise Terminal, details of which are provided by the National Port Administration (ENAPOR) of Cabo Verde. In a sad state of events, Africa started the new decade on troubled ground. From the heavy rains that wreaked havoc towards the end of 2019 to the invasion of desert locusts in the East Africa region, food security is at its worst. Aerial spraying and traditional methods are some of the efforts that the farmers and organizations are trying to combat and control the invasion, which is expected to continue due to the favorable ecological conditions for desert locust breeding. In the field of arts, Sahel Art and Empires on the Shores of the Sahara soldiers on at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It showcases more than 200 works of art made from clay, wood, stone, cloth, iron and gold, ranging from more than 2,000 years ago. Said to be the largest exhibit in the Sahel region, the exhibit is meant to counter colonial narratives of violence and insecurity and build a more comprehensive and accurate view of Africa's world history. Let's now have a look at the Great Wall. In the Great Wall of Africa, since its inception in 2007, with an ambition to grow an 8,000-kilometer wall of trees, the project is now approximately 15% complete. Though far from over, lives are already reaping benefits. There is an increase in fertile land that has brought about better security, food security, reduced poverty, and economic opportunities. This brings us to the end of this part. Do stay tuned, we will be back.
Africa growth prospects.
In 2019, Africa had some of the world's fastest growing economies, and this trend is expected to continue, but at a slightly lower rate in 2020. In its latest Global Economic Prospects report, the World Bank said sub-Saharan Africa's regional growth is expected to peak up to 2.9% in 2020, which is 0.2 percentage point lower than its forecast made in October.
Africa experienced strong economic growth rates due to high commodity prices, improved macroeconomic management, and strategies to diversify growth. Many countries have invested strongly in public infrastructure and trade partnerships.
For more on this, we have contacted Joseph Ochieno, a London-based writer and commentator on African affairs. Now, Mr. Ochieno, what has been driving the rapid growth of African economies over the last few years?
No, Africa is the richest continent when it comes to natural resources. So natural resources, commodities have by and large been at the lead. In fact, natural resources has taken up to nearly 25%. And these are from every piece of minerals that you might want, the world might want, will be across the African continent, and of course, oil and gas.
While there is a rapid increase in economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa, the standards of living have not improved for many Africans. In fact, there are some projections indicating an increase of people living in absolute poverty in the continent. Critics say ordinary Africans are evidently not benefiting enough from this growth. The Overseas Development Institute says the absolute number of people living in extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa could increase by over 50 million between 2011 and 2030 to 470 million people. Now, why do we have this disconnect between economic growth in Africa and the reality of lives of people in a continent where countries experiencing rapid economic growth still have high levels of poverty?
I also think that one of the things that governments need to do about this is, and they've not really done that well, is in as long as you're not able to invest substantially in education. Universal primary education was touted, but many of this has really been substantial skilling of most of the people. Without sufficient investment in good quality education, it is very, very difficult to uplift people from poverty. It's very difficult to uplift people from poverty if you don't take services to the people. That is, decent health and infrastructure.
African industrialization drive is facing challenges due to imported goods from China, Brazil, India, South Korea, and other new emerging economies. As African countries to progress, the need to diversify their economies from being exporters of raw material to producers of finished products for promotion of the industrial sector, including small and medium-scale industries that create jobs and add value to the production chain.
I think first and foremost is the importance of long-term planning. The second thing I think is very important is to have very clear industrial policies that are implemented in a sustainable way. It's not start today and tomorrow then you don't know what you're doing in a very, very sustainable way. The third is heavy investment in science and technology and innovations. And finally, I think, for me, the most important thing for them is the mindset matters. You know, when you're really tired of being poor, when you say it's time for me to really develop and give myself wealth, then you're going to start industrializing.
Now, Western countries, including France, the United States, and the United Kingdom, are still the largest investors in Africa, followed by China and other Asian countries. Investors from these countries flock to Africa to exploit the continent's raw materials and establish factories which are inexpensive to operate due to cheap labor and tax incentives. Now, considering the fact that African countries are still peripheral or based on primary products, can African countries trust these multinationals from industrialized nations to develop their economies?
The reality is that these companies actually come down there to pick most of these products to make themselves wealthy. Do you know why? It's really because Africa continues to be really the, if you like, the garden for primary products. Most of the value additions continue to be done in the West. And more recently, a few countries that perhaps insist that some of these value additions may take place in their own countries, you'll find that actually the level of control by these nation states or by, indeed, in a partnership with the local companies is minimal. The foreign, in this case, Western companies.
Despite projected growth, African economies in 2020 will face a major challenge of rising external debt. African countries justify their debt appetite by saying it is necessary to fund massive infrastructure projects that are crucial in economic development. Several African operational instruments, including the rules of origin, the online negotiating forum, the monitoring and elimination of non-tariff barriers, a digital payment system, and the African Trade Observatory. It has been indicated that trading under the agreement will begin on 1st of July 2020.
But we are pleased to note that in Africa, trends are quite different. The African Free Trade was recently launched. We believe that integration of Africa will portend great opportunity for the region, increase inter-trade within African countries with a potential benefit, increasing trade by more than 50%. This undoubtedly will bring better opportunities in terms of portend better growth, jobs creation and poverty reduction, among all these. The case of East African community have been a very big success. We have registered massive progress by realizing more wider market. There's joint prosperity for all the countries.
And with that note, we come to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Thank you for joining us. From me, Mubarak Kenya, and my team, it's goodbye. Don't miss our next edition for more news and views from Africa, the rising continent.